We've heard music from Gurdjieff's folkloristic impressions. We've heard his music from dervishes and saids who were certainly spiritualized beings, but for certain pieces he reserved his, I would say, his deepest thoughts. Music which is truly of a sacred nature. And in this music, the various strains of influence which came into him from various sources, principally, I would say, Islamic and Christian, are expressed. But these pieces are, in some cases, evocative of actual music, say, of the church, or of the mosque, or of the temple. But most of the time, they are much more personal reflections on very deep matters, which are difficult to describe. They are certainly not hymns in any ordinary sense of the word, even though many of them have the title hymn. And there is a volume from which most of these final pieces come called Hymns, Prayers, and Rituals. And all three are represented in this last group. The first one is as the title indicates, an Orthodox hymn from Asia Minor. Very simple, very heartfelt. There's an interesting contrast between this very simple, beautiful hymn we just heard and the next one, which comes from a series called Hymns from a Great Temple, all of which are quite strange, full of mystery, very enigmatic, very powerful. And they really suggest the possibility that this great temple that he speaks of was somewhere in the remote heart of Central Asia, although it's not known exactly where it was. But these pieces are obviously reflections. They are in no sense literal reproductions or literal evocations of that music. One of the most powerful, simple, and stark ones is number 9. There is one place where Gurdjieff's teaching, one of his ideas, intersects directly with his music. And this next piece, which is called Prayer for Mercy, is an example of that. What it is the following. Gurdjieff believed that there were two primary laws, two great laws, which govern every process which goes on in the cosmos. And he called them the law of 3 and the law of 7. Sometimes they are referred to by their musical terms, the law of the triad and the law of the octave. And the idea behind the law of 3 is that every manifestation, every phenomenon in the universe is produced by 3 forces and can only come into being as a result of the action of these 3 forces. And the forces he calls affirming, denying, and reconciling. He has composed a number of pieces of music which suggest this particular law in the sharp contrast between affirmation, denial, and reconciliation, in the sense that they are each one divided into 3 parts, and each part is composed of a theme which is the same theme, exactly the same, but played in a completely different way to suggest these 3 primal universal forces. I may have mentioned earlier that as a boy, Gurdjieff was a pupil at the Russian military cathedral school in Kars, Turkey. And there he sang in the church choir. And in many of Gurdjieff's pieces, one absolutely hears clearly the echo of that experience of having heard this magnificent, powerful music of the Russian Orthodox liturgy, which he absorbed and obviously loved. This piece is called Easter Hymn. In the early 1920s, Gurdjieff established his institute at a priory in Fontainebleau, France, and stayed there for a number of years. He frequently made trips to Paris. It was just an hour's drive. One day in 1924, he was driving back from Paris to Fontainebleau when, one doesn't know why, it may have been that he fell asleep. But his car, he was alone in the car, and he drove into a tree. Of course, the car was demolished, and his body was completely shattered. He was not expected to live. But miraculously, by his own extraordinary capacity and control over his physical being, he made a remarkable recovery. And just about a month later, was already composing music again. The first piece he composed was entitled Prayer of Gratitude. The last two pieces we're going to hear tonight are two of his most remarkable ones. Gurdjieff's literary masterpiece is a great work, very long, very complex, very fascinating, called Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. One of the chapters in this book is devoted to an extraordinary dervish who lived in Bukhara. The dervish's name was Haji Asvat Struve, and he had extraordinary powers. He was able to do amazing things with an ordinary grand piano, and was in every way a wonderful creature. So Gurdjieff composed a piece, and this piece is one which I feel is, of all of Gurdjieff's music, the most Western in its orientation. And even though the melody was undoubtedly dictated by Gurdjieff, the way Hartmann harmonized it and arranged it for the piano indicates his devotion to his own Western heritage. The piece is remarkable in its harmonic beauty and subtlety. And it is the title, original title of the composition is after hearing a reading of the chapter, The Bukharian Dervish, Haji Asvat Struve. I was playing this piece over this afternoon, and it suddenly occurred to me for the first time that I feel that in this piece, Hartmann was expressing his love and devotion for his own master. final piece this evening has a unique history. Most of Gurdjieff's sacred dances, his movements, were fairly short. I mean, they might last 3 or 4 minutes, something like that. But occasionally, he went for, shall we say, a larger format. And at one point in the early 20s at Fontainebleau, he created a movement, and these sacred dances and exercises are generally known commonly under the general title, the movements. He created a movement which was actually more than a movement. It was an entire ritual entitled The Initiation of the Priestess. And it represented a ceremony in which a young woman, a young priestess, is being introduced into the sacred mysteries. Hartmann composed an extraordinary piece of music to accompany this movement. It was performed in his orchestration at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in 1923 in Paris, where Gurdjieff gave a whole demonstration of all of his movements. The amazing thing is that the choreography of the movement has been completely forgotten. None of the people who were engaged in it and who were involved in it seem to be able to remember it. There are 1 or 2 photographs, still photographs that still exist, but the entire choreography has been lost. But happily, the musical score still exists, and it is a whole mini drama in which this ceremony, this rite, ritual of initiation transpires before our eyes.